Hi, folks. In AA, we have a principle. Let's live one day at a time. Tomorrow is gone. Today is here. And the future is not yet with us. And in that trite little statement, there is a great deal of wisdom. But like so many of our familiar cliches, it doesn't cover all of the territory and can still leave us rather cockeyed on the subject of time. I make these few observations as a backdrop on talking a little about the traditions. For example, clearly, if a person is all the time in the past, whether with guilt, whether with remorse, or wishing for the good old days when he could drink like a gentleman, no progress at all is possible. And at best, he becomes a conservative who is against all change. On the other hand, if I live in today in a really absolute sense and forget about yesterday and think nothing about tomorrow, I become a creature of pure expediency. And you get nowhere. On the contrary, if I'm always pondering the future, I'm out of the reality of today. So, that if you make these two fair divisions of time and label this one as good, the present, and the past is rather bad, and the future is not something to be concerned with, I think we're out of balance. Actually, time is a stream of consciousness. And we came on it out of the past, through today, and we go out into the future. Now then, what bearing does this have on the AA tradition? You know, at times we're apt to congratulate ourselves upon those traditions as though it were a list of our collective virtues about which we wish to brag. We say, oh yes, we put the common welfare first. Oh yes, we're a pure democracy. Oh yes, we have no punishments, no rules, no regulations, a beautiful benignity in that sense. And we don't get complicated with endorsements or alliances. And we keep ourselves as collectively poor as possible so as to not get messed up with dull, filthy lucre. And we have no professional class. You know, plumbers can do as well as anybody with AA, only to truth. We just don't need that. And so on. We go through this list as though we were reciting a list of virtues that are singular to us. Well, I submit that's a rather dangerous and childish thing. Actually, these 12 traditions, which are before me here, are in reality a codification of the lessons of past experience that we got out of the school of damned hard knocks in the early days of AA, and which we continue to get. These are the lessons of experience. This list of hopeful do's and don'ts. Now then, I think about the origins of some of these traditions. I believe the theme of our upcoming conference is really the common welfare comes first. Without AA unity, there can be no recovery. That's a frank recognition of the situation. But as you look at the traditions, one after another, you see that all of them are directly or indirectly related to this subject of the common welfare. And you see this idea in great strength in this last tradition. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Well, that, I think, is a spiritual statement of the idea of the common welfare. Take tradition 2. In the early days of AA, we weren't placing principles that had the personalities all the time. There wasn't any such thing as a group conscience. Dr. Bob and I were school teachers at start, and as our leadership was gained in strength, we began to think very well of ourselves. And it was a very long time before we realized that those in position of leadership are biased by considerations of power, prestige, money, and the like. That's how we started off. But the time came little by little, and through many bitter experiences, and I've undergone some, and Bob has, or any old-timer has. The group conscience began to say to us, the common welfare comes first. We do not have these biases. Let us take thought for the general welfare, and after that, let's see where the leadership stands. So we turn up as leaders who have not power in the usual sense, not prestige in the usual sense. We turn up as genuine servants with the discretion from the group conscience to act with them. And that's our faith here. The general welfare comes first. Take another which may at first glance seem a little remote. At about year 2 of the Akron group, a poor devil came to Dr. Bob in a grievous state. He could qualify as an alcoholic all right. And then he said, Dr. Bob, I've got a real problem to pose you. I don't know if I could join AA because I'm sex deviant. Well, that had to go out to the group conscience. You know, up to then it was supposed that any society could say who was going to join it. And pretty soon, the group conscience began to seethe and boil, and it boiled over. And under no circumstances could we have such a power and such a disgrace among us, said a great man. And you know, right then our destiny hung on a razor edge over this single case. In other words, would there be rules that could exclude so-called undesirability? And that caused us in that time, and for quite a time, respecting this single case, to ponder what is the more important, the reputation that we shall have, what people shall think, or is it our character? And who are we, considering our record? Alcoholism is quite as unlovely. Who are we to deny a man his opportunity? Any man or woman. And finally, the day of resolution came. And a bunch were sitting in Dr. Bob's living room arguing what to do. Whereupon, dear old Bob looked around and blandly said, isn't it time, folks, to ask ourselves, what would the master do in a situation like this? Would he turn this man away? And that was the beginning of the AA tradition. That any man who has a drinking problem is a member of AA if he says so, not whether we say so. Now, I think that the import of this on the common welfare has already been established because it takes in even more territory than the confines of our fellowship. It takes in the whole world of alcohol. Their charter to freedom to join AA is assured. Indeed, it was an act in the general welfare. Then we got into, very naturally, into this question of how we were going to relate ourselves to other people in the field of endeavor. How are we going to relate ourselves to the public at large? And again, the same question. The public welfare, or the AA welfare, the general welfare. And we came up with the view that we had better stick to our lane. We could offer our principles to the whole world and offer the whole world everything but AA's name, which we would like to have stand for certain principles. And this, you see, has served the general welfare. Now, there is a terrific amount of deviations, you see, all this time. Letters were pouring in after the Saturday Post piece into the office. And naturally, we were getting married through the microphone, through broken anonymity, to all sorts of enterprises, some good, some bad, some indifferent. So the lesson was born in. We're not criticizing endorsements in society around us, but we dare not give it. Not that we're afraid, this is such a truth. It's good sense, and we've already seen what's happened when we start to do this. And so it goes down through this whole list of traditions. In the early days, in public relations, the AA thought, well, I'll get myself on the radio. I got connected. I'll get my name and picture in the paper, like what everybody else does. But after a few had fallen on their faces after doing this, we began to see that it wasn't for us. So, as I said, our tradition is a list of the lessons of yesterday. So that as you read the traditions with a sense of history and information about it, you will relive our past, and you will see how we have brought forth from the past on its time stream the lessons thereof, and have tried to make estimates about the future. We are not absolutely fixed in all of our principles. There is room to change. On the other hand, we shall not lightly cast away these hard-earned principles which bear on our unity, on our survival, on our growth under God's grace. As Herb left us, I think that we step out of one epoch into another. During his tenure, the last basic modification was made in our structure, the ratio change, in which we assume full responsibility as a fact for the conduct of our world affairs. This, perhaps, was the last great change in basics. And as I remarked this afternoon, or this afternoon session, I made the remark that now it is a question of preserving what we have, of improving its function. You can always improve its function. But I don't think I nailed that proposition down. I think I made it seem as though everything was going to be clear sailing from here out. And when Tommy Breen got up to keynote this thing, we have a keynoter now, you know, probably will ever after. I'm going to lose my job, I can see that. Anyway, Tom got up and he said, it's all very well that we have the stuff. It's very well that we have the tradition. It's very well that our functional structure seems adequate. But let us be vigilant. The problems and the difficulties of the future can actually be greater than those we have already survived. Let's not be pessimistic, but let's be realistic. This, in effect, was what he said. And after all, we are living in a most dangerous world. We are surrounded by behavior the exact opposite of that by which we must conform to survive. In other words, minorities are able to say, we are the most important. The general welfare has to wait upon us. And the world is going through these same cycles on what apparently, from a poor alcoholic's point of view, is one hell of a dry bender. A very, very dangerous. So that life may, in the next 10 or 20 years, be a very dangerous one for each of us. It may be dangerous for our whole society. Certainly we have little to fear from religious schism. But let us never underestimate the vast forces which are tearing the world apart. Have you ever sat down and seriously thought what we'd do if we were driven underground? Have you ever seriously thought how we would be affected by firing squads? These are common everywhere. Don't suppose I'm pessimistic, I'm hopeful. No, vigilance is going to be the price that we pay for unity. And the love among us and for each other, that indeed, everything considered, passes all understanding. These are the things that under God's grace, I am certain, will sustain us through all calamities, no matter how formidable.